Yo, what's up, nerds? It's MTG Man. This deck is about Post Malone committing hate crimes. Um, now that's a statement right there. Let me back this up. So this is an $100 Zur the Enchanter deck tag. Now with Post Malone, it's $128, but if you're not playing that printing, it goes down to a whole like 100. Okay, it's $99.30 if you're not playing it with Post Malone. But this deck is about Post Malone committing hate crimes. Now, Zur the Enchanter has always been a pretty popular commander. I mean, he's been out for how many fucking years now? Cold Snap? He's been out for almost 20 years at this point, all right? He's been popular. He's had his ups, he's had his downs. This deck is about hate. I have not been feeling myself lately. Honestly, I've been feeling very radical. I want to go punch a politician and like burn down the CIA and like all that assorted good stuff. So I've just been feeling very hateful as is. So this deck is where I have channeled all of my hate. So Zur the Enchanter, 1 white, blue, black, 1/4 flying. When Zur the Enchanter attacks, you may search your library for an enchantment card with mana value 3 or less. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So, what exactly does this deck do? Well, this deck does hate crimes. And I know that sounds stupid, but no, this deck is about fuck you specifically enchantments. So what do I mean by fuck you specifically enchantments? Well, these are enchantments that are going to just ruin one player's day at the table. If you're in a 4-player pod, this is going to kill one player's deck, probably. Take Aegis of the Gods, right? If your opponent is planning to win with like a Torment of Hailfire or something really big that has to target you, fuck them. Aegis of the Gods is going to give you hexproof. If your opponent is playing a Simic deck where they're playing multiple lands each turn, or just a landfall deck in general, Confounding Conundrum is going to bounce lands back to their hand when they play them. If it's like the second, third, fourth, any land besides their first is going to get bounced back to their hand. Plus, it draws you a card when it enters. This is just going to fuck up landfall decks. Dress Down isn't really like a permanent solution, but it makes a creature it makes all creatures lose all abilities until end of turn. So this can like really turn off some of your opponent's important stuff. Especially any creature that has hexproof, indestructible, things like that. You play Dress Down and then you use your removal to remove them. If a deck relies on a specific creature, this will really fuck up that one creature. Or help you fuck up that one creature. Rest in Peace just kills graveyard decks. It exiles all graveyards, and any card that would be put into a graveyard is exiled instead. So this just says fuck you to all graveyard decks. Spirit of the Labyrinth makes sure players can't draw more than one card each turn. This does hurt you, because you want to be drawing more than one card each turn, if possible. But this is going to hurt your opponents a lot more. All right, this can just turn off certain decks, because there's Storm decks, there's even just those normal blue decks that play like Ominous Seas, and they just want to draw a shit ton of cards. Yeah, you say fuck that. If anybody decides they want a wheel, fuck them. They can draw one card off their wheel. That's it. If they haven't already drawn a card for turn. This just really shuts down certain strategies. Nekusar hates this. Stony Silence can just turn off activated abilities of artifacts in general. Sure, this is going to kill your mana rocks, but this just kills artifact decks. What are they going to do? Back to Basics is going to make non-basic lands not untap during their controller's untap steps. So if your opponent relies on non-basics, they basically just lost the game. This deck plays about 20 basics, so this isn't going to super hurt you, but it can hurt you as well. Eidolon of Rhetoric makes players not be able to cast more than one spell each turn. Lucky for you, Zur doesn't count as a spellcast trigger. Zur just puts the enchantment onto the battlefield, so you can cast a spell for turn and get an enchantment from Zur. And this, again, turns off Storm decks. Gloom just kills white decks. Sure, you play white, so this is going to hurt you too, but white spells cost an additional 3 to play. This just says fuck you to Giada. Any white deck that's like, okay, I'm just going to pump out some creatures, or I'm going to make a bunch of tokens, or whatever, everything costs 3 more. They can maybe do one thing a turn, but you've just specifically fucked over that one player who's playing mono white. And basically nobody else. If you notice, this hurts you too. And that's because when you do a hate crime, you're really hurting yourself, okay? Because all prejudice comes from lack of self-confidence. All right, and if we were all more confident people and more happy with the people we are, Post Malone wouldn't be out here committing these hate crimes. Um, Nevermore just lets you name a non-land card, and that card can't be cast. So commanders, combo pieces, Rhystic Study, literally anything you just don't want to see, you say Nevermore, and they cannot play it. Oppression, whenever a player casts a spell, that player discards a card. Sure, this is going to hurt you as well, but probably less so. The deck can do a fair bit of drawing, so this isn't going to super hurt it. And this is going to hurt a Storm deck or just any deck that cares about their cards in hand a lot more. Propaganda is just going to stop attacking from being an option. If your opponent says, I'm creating 20 tokens and all 20 tokens go to you, you say, can you pay 40 mana? Didn't fucking think so, bitch. And you just propaganda. This will just kind of save you in certain matchups. Tainted Remedy just turns off life gain decks. If an opponent would gain life, they lose that much life instead. And the nice thing about life gain decks is they don't like start gaining life turn 4, 5, 6. They start turn 1. If they have a Soul Warden out, every time a creature enters, they lose 1 life. So they're just starting to burn themselves if they don't remove their own Soul Warden. This can just kill life gain decks. Underworld Dreams, when an opponent draws a card, deals 1 damage to them. If you notice, we do have 2 sides of a spectrum here. You can either turn off their draws and make them only be able to draw 1 per turn, or you can play Underworld Dreams and say, okay, if you're going to draw as much as you want, you're going to feel the pain for that shit. Because Underworld Dreams can kind of just burn out certain players, especially if they're playing some sort of Wields type deck. Verity Circle, one of my favorite cards. This will kill any, like, Elves decks. Any deck that says, I'm going to tap my little guys for mana, no. Because whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it wasn't declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. So if they tap, 10 elves for 10 green mana, that's great for you. You just drew 10 cards, and whenever they use that 10 mana on, you're probably getting rid of. You can also pay 4 and a blue to tap target creature without flying, which is just more value. Other things you can search for. So this deck does a couple other things as well. You can search for Cute Synergy 2. So Cute Synergy 2 is Phyrexian Arena, which I don't even think is really that great of a card. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and lose 1 life, right? But if you have Solitary Confinement out, so you sacrifice Solitary Confinement unless you discard a card at your upkeep. You skip your draw step, you have Shroud, and you prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. So you can't die from damage, you can't die from effects that target you. Your opponent has to have like a Zenith, Approach of the Second Sun, something that just lets them win the game in order to win at that point. Because every upkeep, you draw a card from Phyrexian Arena, you can discard that to Solitary Confinement, and you just don't die. Being able to keep yourself alive like that forever, or until you mill out, I guess, is super powerful. And the fact that both pieces are searchable by Zur, I'm a really big fan of. Cute Synergy number 3. So this can be taken a couple ways. You can either take Unmarked Grave and Buried Alive to put some strong creatures into your graveyard, and then you can search for Animate Dead to reanimate them, because you can search for Animate Dead with Zur, or you can put some small value creatures in your graveyard with Buried Alive, and then each turn you can get 1 back out with Oath of Ghouls. Because Oath of Ghouls says during each player's upkeep, if there are more creature cards in that player's graveyard than in target opponent's graveyard, the player may return a creature card from the graveyard to their hand. So this can just help you get creatures in hand, and Buried Alive will kind of set you up. The other nice thing about Unmarked Grave is that you just search for a non-legendary card. So if there's other cards you want to put in your graveyard, you can do that. Or if you have something like Hall of Heliod's Generosity out, you can search your library for an enchantment, put it in the graveyard, and then use Hall of Heliod's Generosity to put it on top. And it's basically a 4-mana tutor then. Sure, that's a bit expensive, but it's just an alternate option. You don't have to do anything, really. We also have the Creation of Avacyn, which for 1 black, you search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. Then you can turn it face up, and if it's a creature card, you lose life equal to its mana value. So this will hurt you, but on turn 3, you may then put the exiled card onto the battlefield if it's a creature card, and if you don't put it onto the battlefield, you put it into its owner's hand. So this can either be a tutor for whatever card you need, or you can search for something like Demon of Fate's Design, which will let you cast an enchantment for free by paying life. Angel of the Ruins, which can be really strong removal, Plus, you can plain cycle it if you don't need it, if it ends up in your hand. Tidespout Tyrant, because this deck can kind of go off on certain turns. So being able to just start bouncing shit can kind of be threatening. And Jin Gataxias, because it's the meanest creature I could think of. This is a hate crime, okay? Your opponents, you can't read this. I know you can't read this. At the beginning of your end step, you draw 7 cards, and each opponent's maximum hand size is 0. So they cannot have cards in hand at end of turn. Every turn, at the end of turn, they will discard their hand, which is just super threatening, and being able to cheat it out with like Animate Dead can kind of just win you the game sometimes. Draw-wise, we play Mystic Remora because it's easy to search for with Zur, plus it's just a lot of value. Entity Tracker is going to let us draw off of every enchantment, so it's an auto-include basically. Everwatching Threshold will punish your opponents for attacking you by letting you draw cards. There's not even a good chance they'll get to attack you, but it's a nice option if your opponents are getting aggressive. Letting you refill your hand is sometimes better, even if you're taking damage. You know, sometimes you don't search for propaganda. Instead, you search for Everwatching Threshold. And like I said, it's Zur searchable, so that's good. Induced Amnesia. So when it enters, target player exiles all cards from their hand face down and then draws that many cards. So it's a wheel on an enchantment, which is cool. But when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you return the exiled cards to their owner's hand. So if you know your opponent has something strong, you can make them exile their hand to just kind of get rid of whatever the new threat was going to be. Or you can exile your own hand to draw a bunch of cards. You know, if you have 4 lands in hand, you might as well exile your hand, draw 4 new cards, and keep playing. Or you can then destroy Induced Amnesia later to get those 4 cards back in hand. So you're never really completely losing those cards. We also have Mesa Enchantress that you can draw when you cast an enchantment. Necro Dominance, you skip your draw step, and at the beginning of your end step, you can pay any amount of life, and if you do, you draw that many cards. But your maximum hand size is 5, and if a card or token will be put into your graveyard, you exile it instead. So it kind of stops you from doing any of the graveyard shenanigans. But this can let you draw a shit ton of cards and just keep your hand full. This might even be better to get than Phyrexian Arena when you're doing the Q comp, when you're doing Solitary Confinement. Okay, what else? Sorry. Nerd Rage, other option. When it enters, you draw 2 cards, which is kind of nice if you need cards immediately. This isn't really terrible to search with Zur. You also have no maximum hand size, and whenever the enchanted creature attacks, if you have 10 or more cards at hand, it gets +10/+10. So if you can keep your hand at 10 cards, Zur will be swinging in for 11 damage every swing. So 2 Zur swings will be lethal commander damage. Not that that's going to happen too often, but it's an option. We also can search for Alseids of Life's Bounty. This is a way to protect Zur, because Zur is going to be removal bait, okay? Players see Zur, they know you're searching for hate crimes, basically, and, yeah, they don't like that. So they're probably going to try and remove Zur, and being able to search out Alseids of Life's Bounty in order to protect Zur is kind of nice. Let's see. What else? We play counterspells. We like Spell Pierce, Essence Scatter, and Negate because they're just kind of easy to cast. You're not going to have to worry about them, and they can kind of just get rid of whatever a problem is going to be. We also play some like simple creatures, like Slumbering Keepguard lets you scry 1 whenever an enchantment enters, but that value can kind of just add up over time. Plus, you can pay 2 and a white to give him +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. You can do that multiple times. That's not a once per turn. So if you have 6 enchantments out, you pay it once, he's a 7/7. You pay it a second time, he's a 13/13. And while 13/13 isn't like amazing, being able to swing in for that amount of damage can kind of just finish off games sometimes. We also have Balemurk Leech and Grim Guardian. Both have when it or an enchantment enters under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. So this will just kind of burn your opponents out while you're playing enchantments, which is kind of nice. And Grim Guardian is searchable by Zur, so it could be nice if you need a blocker. Ramp-wise, we're playing a lot of low ramp, okay? Zur wants you to go turn 1 land, turn 2 land, and then Mana Rock, and then turn 3 Zur, because you want to get Zur out as fast as possible. So we're playing Sol Ring, Arcane Signet, Azorius Signet, Charitable Levy, which I think this card is kind of underrated. It makes non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast, which sure, that'll slow you down, but it also slows down your opponents. And whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, you put a collection counter on Charitable Levy. And then if there are 3 or more, you sacrifice it, draw a card, and then search for a plains and put onto the battlefield tapped. White always struggles with drawing cards and ramping. I think this is a really nice way to draw a card and ramp in white. I mean, it's nothing absurd. It's nothing super, super powerful, but I think that even just that nice little bit of slowdown is going to help with this deck. Dimir Signet, Orzhov Signet, Starfield Mystic, I count as ramp because it just kind of makes your enchantments cost less. Talisman of Dominance, Talisman of Hierarchy, Talisman of Progress, and then removal-wise, these aren't hate crimes, but putting someone in witness protection is pretty devious. I mean, you probably did something really terrible if somebody you know has to go into witness protection, or they did something terrible. Like, either way, not great. So all of these enchantments in the removal, you can also search out with Zur. So if your opponent has a threat, you swing with Zur at whatever player doesn't have a flyer, and then you search for witness protection, or detention sphere, or grasp of fate, or imprison in the moon. There's also like exchange of words, exchanges 2 target creatures' text boxes for as long as it's on the battlefield. So if you have let's just say you have Eidolon of Rhetoric, right? Where Eidolon of Rhetoric's ability doesn't matter what creature it's on, it affects all of the players. So if your opponent has even just a Birds of Paradise, you can make your Eidolon of Rhetoric tap for mana like Birds of Paradise. And you can then have the Birds of Paradise have the Eidolon of Rhetoric's effect so that it just kind of fucks over players still. That's not like a great example, but you basically just take whatever the most powerful text box is on the battlefield, whether it's a demon that has a bunch of abilities or just whatever you can. You take the most powerful text box. Out of time, when it enters, you untap all creatures, then those creatures phase out until it leaves the battlefield. It has vanishing, and you put a time counter on it for each creature phased out this way. So if each opponent has 2 creatures and you have 2 creatures, you will then phase out all creatures for 8 turns. This can kind of just remove your opponent's ability to attack you for a while, and is like super efficient removal, especially because you can search for it with Zur. And the other nice thing you can do is take a card like Riptide Laboratory, where you can pay 1 and a blue to return a wizard you control to its owner's hand. So Zur attacks, you search for the enchantment, you get out of time. Then you bounce Zur back to your hand with Riptide Laboratory, so he doesn't phase out, and you can just recast him in order to get more value. We also have Temporary Lockdown, because it does a similar thing, where it's just going to exile each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less until it leaves the battlefield. So any tokens decks, anything just super small, Temporary Lockdown can kind of just fuck up your opponent's board. And sure, this will like hit your mana rocks and some of your small creatures, but sometimes you really don't care. It's going to get rid of a lot. Touch the Spirit Realm is good removal, plus you can use it to flicker your Zur the Enchanter, or any of your other creatures, really. The other thing is you can use the channel ability to flicker him so that he can get around out of time, again, because you don't want to have Zur phased out. Going into value, so As Foretold, you can search for with Zur, and I think it's actually really powerful. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you put a time counter on As Foretold, and then once each turn, you can pay 0 rather than pay the mana for a spell you cast with mana value X or less, where X is the number of time counters on it. So Zur attacks, you search for it. On your next upkeep, you can cast a 1 mana spell for free. That's okay, It's nice value, but here's the thing. It's on each turn. So on your opponent's turn, if you have a 1 mana instant, you can also cast your 1 mana instant for free on each of their turns. And then once it's at 2, now you can cast either a 1 mana spell or a 2 mana spell free every turn. This deck doesn't play a shit ton of instants, to be fair, okay? But this will let you get in some like free counter spells, free creatures, things like that. We also want to do this thing where we can copy Zur's trigger with things like Lithiform Engine, Strionic Resonator, or using the instant part of Virtue of Knowledge. Being able to copy that trigger and get a second enchantment is actually super strong. And then Virtue of Knowledge is super strong as is, because it has, if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Now for 5 mana, that might seem like, okay, it's kind of like Panharmonicon, but if you think about it, you will then be drawing an extra card off of Entity Tracker, some of your hate pieces, I think, will work on the double. But one of the big things is like Grasp of Fate. When it enters, since that's an ETB trigger, you'll get to exile 2 things instead of 1. So it can kind of just up the removal power of the deck pretty quickly. We also play Copy Enchantment to either do one of 3 things, really. If your opponent has a way to get rid of an important hate piece, like if you have Gloom to kill a white deck, and you know that that white deck has a Turn to Dust or Disenchant or whatever in their hand, you can use your Copy Enchantment to make a copy of Gloom so that the opponent has to get through 2 Glooms now. Or you can copy something that's giving you a lot of value, like a Rhystic Study that's somebody else controls, or your Mystic Remora, or you just copy the best thing on the field. So Rhystic Study, Omniscience, Primeval Bounty, like whatever big enchantments on the battlefield, you can kind of just copy, and it's searchable by Zur. Ondu Spirit Dancer is a nice option. It just copies an enchantment once each turn. So sure, you might only get 1 extra enchantment, but being able to get 2 Mystic Remoras, being able to get 2 of a hate piece, it's just going to be so much stronger. Being able to copy your enchantments is pretty nice. This is another good creature to put in the graveyard and reanimate. Archon of Sun's Grace is kind of a win con for the deck. The deck doesn't have too many specific win cons. What it wants to do is, I get this enchantment, I shut down player 2. I get this enchantment, I shut down player 3. I get this enchantment, I shut down player 4. Once all 4 players are shut down, you kind of just want to grind out the value. But you're also just going to be drawing cards, gaining value, attacking with your commander. So the deck can win a couple different ways. But this just basically has, whenever an enchantment enters, you create a 2/2 Pegasus with flying, and then your Pegasus also have lifelink, and you just swing in with a board of Pegasus. Land-wise, we play Adarkar Wastes, Arcane Sanctum, Command Tower, Darkwater Catacombs, Exotic Orchard, Fetid Pools, Glacial Fortress, Hall of Heliod's Generosity, Irrigated Farmland, Islands, Plains, Riptide Laboratory, River of Tears, Shineshadow Snarl, Skycloud Expanse, Swamp. So the deck does play a fair bit of basic lands so that you can use back to basics. Showing how this deck wants to play. Wow, okay. Yeah, this is kind of an ideal-ish hand. So we draw for turn. What the fuck is that? Wow. What? I mean, okay, so we would go back to turn 4, because I accidentally hit too many. We would Soul Ring. We would Arcane Signet. We would go to turn 5, draw for turn. We would Arcane Signet for a Talisman of Dominance. We would Signet and Talisman for an Orzhov Signet. We would Island and Signet for an Azorius Signet. And we can't do anything more, so we go to turn... Oh god, what are the chances? So we for a Dimir Signet, and then we Arcane Signet and Orzhov Signet for a Talisman of Progress, and then we tap out for Zur the Enchanter. What the fuck was that hand? And I guess we would start swinging in next turn. Let me show this deck actually wants to play. That was just really funny. So I had to mulligan once, but this is about what I think a good hand looks like. You put the plains back. We have an island. If we need to witness protection turn 1, like if somebody has an Esper Sentinel or just something we think is going to be a problem, we can witness protection. Then we go to turn 2, play a Skycloud Expanse into an Arcane Signet, pass. Now, we have a land for turn 3. We go turn 3 Zur, go to turn 4, and then from turn 4, we can either start by casting Witness Protection if we need to remove something. We have Slumbering Keepguards that will start scrying whenever we play an enchantment. And then we also could just wait. And then we move to combat, swing with Zur. We search our library for an enchantment. I don't know if there's anything that will specifically get us mana. Well, so what we could do is we search for Nerd Rage. We move it to the battlefield. It comes in equipped to Zur, so we draw 2 cards. Then we move to main phase 2. Go in for a Ondu Spirit Dancer. So now we'll get to copy 1 enchantment every turn. And then we go to turn 5. At this point, Witness Protection removes something. I think we swing with Zur again. We get to search our library. So if the opponent has enough of a board where it's a point to get a hate piece, we get a hate piece. But if we have no need for a hate piece, I think Necro Dominance might be the best choice here. We put on the battlefield, and at our end step, we will... Give me a second. Okay, let me cook here. Because we still have turn to play. We move to main phase 2. We'll play a Slumbering Keepguard. We'll play Creation of Avacyn. So we get to scry 1. We'll put it back on top because we have to search our library anyway. So because of Undo Spirit Dancer, we're going to get to copy the Creation of Avacyn. So we get to search for 2 creatures and exile them. Now, we also are going to be losing life to Necro Dominance if we want to draw cards. So I don't think we remove anything, like, crazy here. I think some value creatures would actually be the best choice. So something like Entity Tracker, and then... Some part of me really wants to go for Jin Gitaxias because it would be funny. This is a 40 life format, so I guess we might as well get Jin Gitaxias. So we're going to move them to exile. And then turn 5, the Creation of Avacyn... Sorry, we need to shuffle. The Creation of Avacyn will tick up. So we lose 10 life and then an extra 3 life. So we lost 13. At the end of our last turn, I think we would have drawn up to 10 off of Necro Dominance. So that's another 6 life we would have lost. So that's 19 life gone, which seems like it hurts, but let's be real here. Next turn, we'll get to cheat out Jin Gitaxias and Entity Tracker. The first enchantment, or just any enchantment we play, once per turn we get to copy. So we can kind of just hold our opponents down with our enchantments. And we have a Zur the Enchanter, which while we have 10 cards in hand, is an 11-14, which can swing twice to do lethal commander damage. So at this point, we've basically already won the game. That's kind of how the deck works. It really just wants to fend off whatever the opponent's doing, and it's super fucking mean. Like, this is not a I want to have fun with my friends deck. This is a I hate the world and I hate everyone sort of deck. And I think there's something beautiful about that. I think hatred has no place in society, except for, like, pedophiles and, like, really terrible people. I don't really think we should be hating on anyone else. So I think putting it into a creative hatred outlet was really positive for me. I think I feel a little bit better. That being said, I know MTG Man hasn't really uploaded for a while. I've been kind of going through it, like I mentioned. I've been thinking of a couple decks I want to put together, I want to work on. There's this Calyx Scion deck I've been calling my magnum opus that may be my new favorite deck of all time. It's basically like the fucking Jason Voorhees of decks. You just ramp to get Calyx Scion as fast as possible, and then you equip him with equipments, and then you have these enchantments or whatever else, so that every time he dies, he comes back, and you just keep bringing him back, and he's basically unkillable. So I've been really in love with that deck lately. I've gotten into cube building, because I really think the draft environment is interesting. I've really been studying that. I also... there's this deck I might put on the channel where you basically just play God. Like, all of your effects are either, like, blessings or natural events. And then you play these big spells because Ramos is going to give you big mana. And you just kind of pretend to be God. You whisper into whoever's to your right at the table and be like, I'm here to tell you that the angels shall descend from the skies, blah, blah, blah. You give them, like, these riddles and these, like, oracle fortunes every time you foretell a card, and you be wacky with it, okay? I think there's a lot of room for, like, fun deck building. But the deck also majors in land destruction, so it's kind of evil. I don't know if I'm going to put that on the channel or not. I've been working on Merfolk. I've been working on just a couple side projects. I was kind of thinking about doing a podcast at one point. I did 2 different Cabal builds I'm, like, halfway in the middle of. I have Let's Get Infinite, which I might talk about on the channel, I'm going to be honest. I've been working on these, like, funny creature type decks, like this cool bear one I actually really liked. The insect one I tuned up a little bit, and then spiders I'm halfway in the making. It's kind of just been hard for me to focus on one project, and I feel like I've been lacking a lot of the pull through. And even though it's not like I spend a ton of effort, okay, I put together a deck list, and I'm gonna be honest, every deck list I put on the channel, it's because I enjoy it. I enjoy something it does. I enjoy the concept. I enjoy the message. I'm not about high art here, okay? Nothing I do is all that impressive, but sometimes I wake up and it all feels like it's just too much. Um, so I haven't just had the drive to put out a lot lately, and I've been working on some side projects, some stuff I want to do on the side channel. Um, I made a card game a little bit ago that I'm thinking about getting printed. I've been doing college stuff. It's been a lot, y'all. That being said, this has been MTG Man. Boycott Post Malone. Uh, get it trending on Twitter.com. Fuck Post Malone. He commits hate crimes or something like that. Even though, let me be real, I really like Post Malone. I don't like his music's meh, in my opinion, but like as a person, he seems delightful. I like how he interacts with the Magic community. I really like just how he comes off in interviews. He seems like a genuinely good dude. And I really hope that that doesn't come out to be false later on, okay? Because then Post Malone committing hate crimes might become too accurate of a deck name, and I might have to change it. And I'm too lazy to change it. Um, that being said, this has been MTG Man. I'm out. Peace.